for many law firm owners, for many people, having a direct conversation where you are confronting a problematic behavior oftentimes feels like you're confronting a person. And despite the myth, many lawyers are not confrontational. We'll confront for our clients, we'll confront in the adversarial process, but we won't confront for ourselves. So if you won't confront for yourself, or you feel struggle in having to have those conversations, it makes sense that it is really difficult and can be really challenging for someone who is giving a reference to give out negative feedback. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, where on today's show, we're going to be talking about how to up-level your reference checks. So this is a topic that comes to us straight from our Law Firm Mentor community. And for those of you that are not familiar, we do have a membership here at Law Firm Mentor where you can get insights, strategies, and direct coaching on how to improve the quality of your law firm and ultimately how to scale it into the stratosphere. So with that, today's topic, again, comes from that community. And by the way, for those of you that are new to Law Firm Mentor, or if this is the first time you're checking out the podcast, I'm guessing, are watching us on YouTube. That is kind of where we live in this podcast. So please subscribe to the channel so you can get more alerts as to when our next episodes are going to drop. We drop episodes on Mondays and Thursdays. But in addition to that, of course, here over on YouTube, we have a lot of information about the Law Firm Mentor membership, as well as other programs that we have going on throughout the year. And if you're out there in the audio sphere, if you're checking us out on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, Google, etc., please also do subscribe and check us out on YouTube. That's really where we live. That's where you can find a lot of information about coaching, about how to coach yourself to success, and ultimately the strategies that you will need if you want to get to the next level with the facilitation of a coaching community. So with that, let's dive into today's topic. So one of the things that I'm really excited about with this topic is talking to you guys about references. And the reason why I'm excited about it is because this is one of these areas where just a little bit of tweaking can get you stratospherically different results, better results than you could ever have possibly imagined. Why do I say that? Well, one of the reasons I say it is because I think there is a very common misperception that people have that if they are talking to references, right, if they're checking information, that they're going to get candid guidance from people who are similarly business owners or business leaders like they are, that they're going to be talking to people who really want to be honest and want to give good information so that you can make a good decision, the right decision for your company. And unfortunately, that really is just not the case. I think what happens a lot of times is that people who are listed as references have a positive relationship with the candidate that is being considered. And it isn't necessarily that they're going to lie to you. They're going to share with you what their experience has been, but they're going to share it through the lens of having a positive perception of the candidate. You don't necessarily want to go out looking for negative information on your candidate, but you also want to be realistic that you are hiring a human and humans make mistakes. And even top quality high performers have some challenges. Now, those challenges might not be such that you wouldn't hire them, but they are probably things that you would like to know going into an employment relationship with them so that you can coach them to their success, so that you can be on alert when you're going to give them certain types of activities or certain responsibilities, and or so that you can avoid perhaps hiring them in the first place, because they might have been great for the person that you're getting the reference from, but they might not be great for your company, right? Your company is its own ecosystem and has its own needs. Sometimes those needs will overlap the last employment position or the last place that they were where that reference is calling you from or speaking with you from. But many times not, right? So just getting a little bit better at how we ask questions and seek information from references can give us a whole world of great information and a much better outcome from our hiring process. All right. So we're going to give you 3 strategies today to help you to up-level your reference checks. The first one I want to give you is very simple, but not easy. Okay. The simple part of it is to be very specific when you are seeking a reference. Okay. It's that simple, but not easy. Here's why it's not easy. When I say be specific, a lot of people might have in their mind something along the lines of, hey, can you tell me everything that there is to know about what this person was like when they worked for you? Are they a good employee? Would you hire them again? You think that that's being specific because you're asking them about the employment relationship with this person, right? You're asking them about their experience of the person. You're asking them, would they hire or not, right? That seems very clear. But when you really think about it, those are actually very generic questions, right? Is this a good employee or would you hire them again? Gets at an opportunity or gives an opportunity to the person giving the reference to just kind of wax philosophical about all the positives about the candidate. It doesn't really give you specific information that you're going to need. They might reinforce some things you've heard before, presumably from the candidate, maybe even from other people from whom you're checking references. But it's not going to give you concrete data that can either challenge your assumptions about the person or fill in the blanks of things that you haven't quite figured out about them in the hiring process. It also isn't going to give you a direct piece of information about whether they fit with your company and or can do the job that you want them to do. So I want you to think about asking this instead. What did this person do better than anyone else that you employed in this role? And what might be a weakness that this person has that came out through the specific activities that you had them do in this role? Okay. Now, by virtue of asking it that way, by virtue of asking, what do they do better and what are their challenges, you are giving that person a cue to talk about specific things, right? What did I do better, right? You're asking them to compare to other people. So that means that they're going to have to summon in their mind, who are the other people that I've had in this role and what made this particular candidate stand out? What is their value proposition? Now, here's the great thing. They might have something completely different than what this candidate has identified as their sweet spot. That could be feedback in and of itself. If the person you're speaking to says, this person was great with clients, they have a real aptitude for being able to communicate effectively, making people feel cared for, making people feel listened to, ensuring that the person is out of distress, ensuring that the person continues to have a positive perception of the firm. And the candidate might say that their best skill is writing. Now, they might be able to prove that to you from their perspective. They might give you writing samples that show that they're a great writer, that they have all of the positive attributes of writing that you actually are looking for. But if somebody else is rating them more highly than anyone else with this particular aptitude, this might tell you this is a person that needs to be in front of our clients, or this is a person that we might want to funnel in a particular role that we might not have considered before. The other thing is that when you're talking about weaknesses, one of the things that becomes really challenging is to be able to assess whether a person can clearly see themselves, right? Sometimes people will give you a weakness, right? We've talked about on previous episodes how it's always a no-no to hire somebody who won't give you a weakness at all. But let's say that you ask a person and they identify a weakness as something like timeliness, right? They really struggle to get things done on time, but they do have a process to ensure that they get things done on time, but it's something that they have to work at, right? Can't fault them for giving you that. They have a workaround for it. So that might be otherwise something that you can look beyond. But if you're asking their previous employer might have a completely different weakness. Their previous employer might not be aware of the fact that they struggle to get things in on time because they might have always have overcome that, right? So that might not be truly a weakness that manifests in their daily work experience. Maybe the weakness that manifests for that particular employer is that, let's say they had a poor attitude with clients, right? And that they got client complaints. Well, the candidate might not be hiding that from you. They might not be lying to you about it. Sometimes they could be. Sometimes they could be aware of it and they're like, oh crap, I can't say that because, I don't intend to change my personality and, it rubs people the wrong way. It is what it is, right? So they could be hiding that from you. But let's assume that they're not. Let's assume best intentions. They're just not aware of that. Well, that's a real risk for your business whether it's the kind of risk that you're willing to take based on what you're going to have them do is a case by case, right? You could be hiring somebody who's going to be doing a lot of drafting more so than client interaction. Or you might have a job that's very client centric. They're going to have to be doing a lot of advising clients front line, and you need somebody who's on it there because maybe you already have some negative reviews online, or maybe you need to be able to step away and hire this person who can just go run files, and you can't really feel confident in that if they're going to alienate your clients, right? So you have to be thinking about it through the lens of, what am I going to have this person do? And what can I ask of the person who is giving me the reference that can really highlight that for me? The more specific you are with what you're asking for, the better the information is, and the more likely you'll be able to rely upon that in making a hiring decision. All right, strategy number 2. This is what we refer to as the red flag funnel, okay? This is where you are going to directly seek negative information. Now, here's where the difficulty lies with this. A lot of people, even those that consider themselves highly honest, who would do nothing that they ever consider to be even remotely dishonest, will have difficulty in giving out negative feedback. Some of these same people are the people that would struggle to have a face-to-face direct conversation with someone who they felt was subpar, right? And just think about that pragmatically for a moment. Like, we all have been there where there is an employee who is otherwise great, but they do this one thing that is just a challenge, and it comes up over and over again. And you've talked to them about it and you've coached them around it, but it's sensitive and it makes them feel bad, or they get really defensive. Maybe you know that this person is dealing with something personally in their life and you feel bad that you have to deal with the fact that they are now struggling in some area of critical performance in your law firm, but you have to deal with it, right? And you white knuckle through it. You don't want to have the conversation, right? Just as that is difficult for you and for many law firm owners, for many people, having a direct conversation where you are confronting a problematic behavior oftentimes feels like you're confronting a person. And despite the myth, many lawyers are not confrontational, right? We'll confront for our clients, we'll confront in the adversarial process, but we won't confront for ourselves, right? So if you won't confront for yourself, or you feel struggle in having to have those conversations, it makes sense that it is really difficult and can be really challenging for someone who is giving a reference to give out negative feedback. So the strategy that you want to employ here when we talk about the red flag funnel is you want to always start by giving permission to the person that you're speaking to give negative feedback. It sounds really silly, right? This person doesn't know you. This person doesn't really care what you think of them. This person might not even have a great relationship with the candidate about whom you're calling. But that person might still need to have the permission, the tacit agreement, the freedom to be able to speak about the candidate in a way that's going to give you what is most helpful. So you might want to start with a little preamble, right, to the question, but also to the general area of exploration when you're talking about weaknesses. So that might look like this. So, Mr. So-and-so or Ms. So-and-so, every candidate that we have employed, and I'm sure you're the same way, has strengths and weaknesses, right? Because we're all human. And I know it's really easy when we have previously worked with someone. Maybe this person resigned and we weren't even thrilled to have them leave because we thought generally very highly of them. That person still has areas that are not necessarily optimal in their performance. So now I want to talk to you a little bit about that, right? You're kind of giving them a cue that you're going to ask them about something negative. But now you want to ask a question in a way that doesn't invite them to bash the person, because you don't want to create resistance in the person that you're speaking to have to defend the person, right? Even if the person left and maybe they were fired, maybe they left of their own accord. Even if the person left and the person that you're checking references from, right, about the candidate might not have the greatest opinion of the candidate, if you are asking them to summon up horrid, negative, awful things about the person, that oftentimes is going to feel bad for the person that you're speaking to, right? Because they don't want to feel like they're that nasty person, right? That mean girl who is out and about talking negatively about previous employees. Now, there are some people that will have no problem with this, right? There are some people that will have no problem opening up and saying, oh, well, let me tell you everything that I got here. And if you sense a little bit of glee in the person you're speaking to bash the candidate, you might also have an instinct to disregard that a little bit, because you might say, you seem like you're a little triggered here, right? You're a little bothered by this. There might be something more at play that is more than just the candidate. It might be something that went on between the two of you, or even some of your own stuff coming up, right? So you have to be mindful of too strong a response as well. But much more often, you're going to have too tepid a response. So you want to give them that permission. And then you want to go into asking specifically about how you could approach them, or what you might need to do to approach them to get to success. So you might want to ask, if I were to coach this person on their weaknesses, what should I be on the lookout for? Now, this question is going to prompt in the person from whom you're seeking a reference. It's going to prompt them to think about a couple of things. One, they have to think about what the actual weakness is that you might be coaching them on, because you didn't tell them, hey, if I was coaching them about this specific weakness, you just said, if I was coaching them about a weakness, right? So they first have to think about what were the person's weaknesses. But then second, you ask, what might I encounter, right? So that is about how the person is going to receive feedback, how the person is going to integrate, and whether or not this person actually had the responsibility and took the time to give that feedback to the candidate. Sometimes you learn that the person that you are getting information from really never had responsibility over developing the candidate. So if that happens, that means that that reference might not be as valuable to you, and you might need to seek references elsewhere, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. But it's really important that you ask that question in a way that invites them to think about what the weakness is and think about how the person might actually receive feedback if you were to bring up that weakness and deal with it in the employment relationship. The other thing is that you want to ask them about blind spots. Is there any area that this candidate might have a blind spot about their own performance? This, of course, goes to the issue of seeing oneself. We've talked about that before, right? You want candidates who are willing to look objectively as possible at themselves and see where they have weaknesses. And by the way, when I say as objectively as possible, I am not saying that the candidate needs to be down on themselves. You don't want somebody who is overly pessimistic about themselves any more than you want somebody who is overly optimistic about themselves. Somebody who's too pessimistic about themselves, that might have a self-esteem issue, will oftentimes have difficulty recovering from making mistakes, right? Because we know mistakes happen. We're all human. If the person makes a mistake, you want them to be able to shake it off, say, oh crap, yeah, here's what I did. Here's what I did wrong. I see it now. I'm learning from that mistake. I've got a plan in place so that I can avoid that in the future. You don't want the person to say, woe is me. I'm awful. I'm so stupid. I can't believe. And they're lamenting the problem, because you want them to get over it so they can get back to work, and so that they can create a positive creation of solution around the problem in the future. If you ask the candidates a reference about blind spots, they might have something, right? They might say, well, this person wasn't really aware of the fact that she was a little gruff when she was dealing with clients. Or perhaps this person might have had some interpersonal issues. She was a little competitive in the office, and sometimes that would create a little friction with other people performing the same role as her. Or, this guy was a really great guy, but he was so averse to giving out negative information that he wouldn't tell clients about things that they really needed to know. So a lot of times that was left to the attorney, and it was really challenging to get him to kind of overcome himself. So you want to think about that. And then the last part of this, when you're, again, asking about the negatives, is you want to ask about environment. Because again, your law firm is its own special ecosystem, different than every other ecosystem where anyone could work. There will be similarities, right? Might be the same practice area, might be the same general size of firm, might be in the same region. But at the end of the day, every firm has its own culture, its own personality, its own energy. So you want to ask about how the person fits within your environment. But of course, the person that you're seeking this reference from doesn't know your environment, unless you're calling somebody who is also a previous employee of yours. you're probably not going to have that much information that you could impart to them to really give them a feel for your environment. So you want to ask them, what type of environment might this person struggle to be successful in? Right? So maybe that's an environment where there's a lot of, chatter going on. I remember one time I interviewed someone. I ultimately made this person an offer, and despite the person being thrilled throughout the entire process and seeming to love our environment, before she even got here, she declined. So I was very surprised, and I was actually a little saddened by it because I really liked the candidate. So I called her and I said, I've received your email telling me that you declined the offer, and I'm really curious why. And the person kind of stammered a little bit, but ultimately said, well, I don't want you to take it personally. It's not you, but there are a lot of women that work in your law firm. And I said, there are men, but there are women. Do you not like women? Now, this is a woman I'm talking to. So I'm trying to tread lightly, but it was kind of shocking to get that response. And she said, well, just as a human, yes, but I found that in my last position, it was very catty. It was very cliquey. I very much felt like the odd man out, odd woman out, and I just didn't like it. And so I really don't want an environment where there are a lot of long employed women employees. I said, okay, have you seen the face of most law firms? Now, I'm saying that somewhat tongue in cheek, but that was this person's concern. This person actually became a mentee of mine. Again, I said I clicked with her as a human, so I really wanted to see her be successful. I was really sad when she didn't accept the position, but for a period of time, we would meet for lunch and I would kind of give her career guidance because I took a liking to her. And one of the things that came up in our conversation was that environment that she had worked in that was really challenging for her. And she ultimately ended up working in an environment that really had two other employees. There was one male paralegal and there was one female attorney, and she loved it. She absolutely loved that environment. It was perfect for her, gave her all of the things that she said she wanted in an employment position. So again, you can find highly capable, highly talented people that just aren't a fit for your environment. And that fit, by the way, has to be assessed on both sides. Does the person feel that they will fit what you are offering? Do you feel that they will fit what you are offering, right? Both people have to see a synergy and a fit there. But ultimately, once you start exploring those negatives with the person that you're seeking the reference from, things will come out. And one of the things that you have to be open to is exploring what they tell you with a little bit more depth, not just, can they do this? Can they do this? How did they do that? Do they work well? Right? Because again, you're looking for a fit. So you're not just trying to get to the competency of the person. You want to get there by virtue of asking some competency questions, but you really want to explore the question of, will this person not just do the job, but do it here, do it well, and do it with us, right? And that us part is about your culture. All right. Third and final strategy here is asking how this person will work for you. Okay. And again, this goes to the issue of culture, but it also goes to the fit for the role that you're going to have them occupy. Right. So here is where you want to be very direct with the person from whom you're seeking the reference. You want to say to them, this person will be tasked with, and fill in the blank, right? This person will be tasked with responding to a high volume of calls and high intensity circumstances. How do you think this person will do with that? Now, here's a situation where I'm going to a certain degree, break the rule, right? The one rule I give you guys all the time is don't tell somebody exactly what you want them to do and then say, hey, can they do it? Right? You don't want to do that when you are interviewing someone. But with references, it's a little bit different, right? You want to directly tell them the types of activities that they're going to have. And then you want to ask them squarely, do you feel that that person will do well with this? How do you feel that they will respond with this? Now, you might say that's not going to tell you a whole lot, right? Because they're going to say, oh, sure. Because again, they're faking good and trying to give that positive reference. But here's the thing. After they say, yes, of course, they'll do great with that, you want to ask them why. You want to ask them for examples of what they experienced of this candidate in their work environment that fits with their perception that this person will do well with this particular activity, right? Again, it's kind of like the show and tell, right? First, you show me that you can do whatever it is that I'm asking of you, and then you tell me, but in reverse, right? It's tell and show, right? So you're telling me this person can, take a high volume of cases and turn them around very quickly. Now, show me how, right? How does your perception that this person can do that and do that well, how does that line up with past events? What exactly can you draw upon that can demonstrate that to me? This is a situation where you're going to ask, again, probing questions. You really want to get to the heart of what the person is saying, because again, sometimes you inadvertently desire the candidate, right? You've been going through the whole process. You have screened the person. Your team has had the first interview, and they've gotten a lot of information about competency and the things that they can do and not do. You've decided to advance them in the process. They took an assessment. The assessment came back good. You used the information from the assessment for the follow-up interview, and you conducted that interview and you were very impressed. And now it's time to check references, and you're like, all right, we're almost at the finish line, right? So you're like, I want this person. And sometimes you can subtly suggest that and be so hardwired to try to seek that person's yes that all the things telling you no kind of get swept aside. So I want you to think about it when you start on this last question, kind of going into the weeds of where's the proof that this person can do the things that you're saying that they can do. And those examples are going to be really helpful for you. If the person can't give you an example, that also is really helpful. That could tell you perhaps you need to discount what they're saying a little bit. Now, the last thing that I want to share, this is kind of a bonus, okay? So just a little while ago, we were talking about the idea of asking references questions and having some people be really, really hesitant to give out negative feedback. 2 points about that. If you have a reference who is very reluctant to give negative feedback, at some point you need to tell them that you will discount any reference who has no negative feedback to give, right? Because that then prompts them to say, oh, all right, well, I've said all these great, wonderful things about the person. If I can't come up with anything really solid to the contrary, all that gets flushed down the drain, and I'm not really helping this colleague, mentee, friend, etc. So now I need to, pony up. That's one thing. The second thing is think about who you're getting references from. And perhaps you need to go off grid. And by off grid, I mean go outside of the list of the people that have been provided to you. I remember when I interviewed for and ultimately got the job offer for the firm that I was with before I started my law firm. I absolutely adored my boss. To this day, he's still a mentor. He's still somebody I regard very highly. But I remember at some point during the interview process, something happened and I was very turned off. So turned off that I almost said, I don't want to work here. Let me go somewhere else. And it was the fact that I had given this particular potential employer at that time the names of references with telephone numbers, emails, etc. And I had even told him I gave all these people a heads up that your call might be coming. Because by that time, he and I had been in a groove. We had had a couple of interviews, had some really great conversations, and I was relatively certain that a job offer would be coming. And one of the things that he said to me in that process is, all right, well, who are the people? Like, what is their relationship to you? And ironically, even though I was being fired from the law firm where I was working when I took this job, story for another day, I told him my current boss is willing to give you a reference. So he already knew that I was being fired from this job, and he knew why. And so ironically, one of the fellow associates that I worked with in the law firm where I was used to work for this particular employer. So she actually called him and gave him a heads up, and they talked regularly because he's such a great guy. He remains in great relationships with all of his former employees. And so she kind of told him what the story was, and he was like, yeah, I'd love to interview her. She sounds great. So he interviewed me. He had the positive perception he was going to make me a job offer. And then it came time to check references. So I thought, wow, I am giving you the person who fired me, right? If you think about that, why would you do that unless you were, certain that the person was going to, give you a positive reference, right? So I'm thinking anything that this employer could possibly want to know, any question that he might have, why did you fire the person? How could you let the person go? The person has A, B, and C, etc. The normal reference questions, but also the questions specific to why this person is not working for you anymore. He was going to get in a way that most future employers don't get, because a lot of people, most lawyers, will say, we don't give references to people that we fired because we don't want to get sued, right? We don't want to say something negative and have that candidate say, I didn't get this job solely because you told this person something negative about me. So most employment lawyers will just say, we don't give references, or you can give a reference that's basically dates of employment, compensation, and, maybe that they left in good standing or something, or they left without an ethics issue or something like that, right? But you're not going to go into detail. That's what a lot of people will advise. A lot of lawyers will advise. So it's rare that you have somebody be able to say, the person who fired me is more than willing to give you a reference. So I'm thinking he's going to call, and he's going to call everyone that I gave. And then out of the blue, while I'd gotten my job offer, we had established my start date. And after that happened, I got a call from the very first legal employer I had, who is a judge, a Superior Court judge in New Jersey. And he called me and expressed how hurt he was that he was hearing from my soon-to-be new boss that I had left my old firm and that I was looking for a new job and that I didn't list him as a reference, and that this employer called him out of the blue. And he said, and of course I talked to him about you. And of course I told him you're wonderful and all the things. But, I was so devastated that you didn't list me. And I had to share with him, I kind of felt blindsided by that. And I said, well, Judge, it's not that I didn't list you because I don't love you or thought you'd say something negative. I didn't list you because I worked for you at the start of my career. I didn't know anything. The first day out of law school, you walk into a Superior Court judge's chambers. You don't know anything other than a stare decisis and, fee simple. And, you know some words. You don't know much else, right? So I was like, of course you saw my work ethic, and of course you saw what I learned over the course of a year. And I left there and had wonderful memories of being there, but I didn't have pertinent, relevant job experience that you could say really bears upon what I can do now as a lawyer. I mean, you could say what I could do as a law clerk, and you could say how hard I worked and that sort of thing. You could give some personality issues, right? But you couldn't give the most relevant information. So it didn't occur to me to list you, but that was the only reason why. And I remember getting off that phone call and thinking, man, this guy could have really harmed my relationship with a former employer, but more importantly, a former and current mentor, somebody I cared for. And I was like, he went behind my back to get information about me. Like, who does that? Now, of course, that was a very immature way to look at it, because who doesn't do that, right? If you could get information that isn't mined and curated for you, like where the candidate says, oh, I want you to hear this. I want you to see this. I want you to get this. Why wouldn't you? Right? There's any number of ways you can get information about candidates that isn't what they give you. You can, courts in most jurisdictions and most matters are a matter of public record. So you could order proceeding tapes or transcripts of their court appearances. So you could get a sense of how they present themselves. You could ask around. You could ask other colleagues who might have been their adversaries. You could ask judges. You could ask local members of their community. There's lots of different ways you can find out about a person, but references are no different, right? So if you know that they work somewhere, maybe they work there for a relatively short period of time, and they kind of describe, oh yeah, it was a blip on the radar screen. I got there. It wasn't a cultural fit, so I moved on. You might know someone that works there, and you might want to call them. And if you can get information, why not? Right? You're not asking for anything that would require a disclosure. You're not like getting a background check, but you're asking, right? And if you can get information from someone who is not on the list, that might very well be the best way for you to get the best information, because it's not filtered for your listening pleasure. All right, everyone. Today we have been talking about up-leveling your reference checks. I'm Allison Williams, your host of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. Again, do remember to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast here on YouTube, and I will see you on our next episode.